pumped to have the Director of Player Personnel for the USHL, United States Hockey League, the league that I was in for 4 freaking years way back in the day. Luke Curadi. Luke, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Toph.
Yeah, you bet. So we've obviously run into each other quite a bit. You are an absolute warrior at RPI, Rensselaer. So not a fun guy to play against for our kids that I coached. But I did want to take it real far back and want to introduce you to our following here. And, you grew up in Cheshire, Connecticut, which is actually right by Quinnipiac and Yale.
Yeah.
So pretty cool spot right there. Very cool that you've been able to play at RPI in the same league as those two teams. So I'm sure you had some pretty good family outings when
Oh yeah. Oh
when
yeah.
the Engineers got to town. Yeah.
Yep.
So wanted to ask you about your childhood. Like, who were your biggest influences growing up in Connecticut that got you into hockey and allowed you to fall in love with the game?
Yeah, like many people, my parents were, the main reason I was able to chase and achieve any of the goals that I had for hockey. Along the way, there was always coaches that took a liking to me for one reason or another. So it was mostly my parents. They, just like anyone, they lug you around all over the place. Fortunately for them, I didn't really play AAA hockey at all, so they didn't, we didn't have to travel all over the country to do everything. But still, that didn't hide us from the early morning practices or games on the weekend. So yeah, definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without mom and dad.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been having a lot of conversations with people lately about like AAA, AA. What's the when to go, when not to go? Is it even like what are your thoughts on that? As somebody that now is the director of player personnel for the top junior league in what some would say North America, but certainly in the United States. But somebody that also played AA hockey for a while. What are your thoughts on that?
I, you know, it, my mom never played hockey at all. She had a great point to me, when I was coming up through squirts and peewees and bantams. Everyone, gets all gung ho about hockey, and one of the points that she made is like, it doesn't matter what they do in 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Once they get to high school age, that's when they should start specializing in the game. That's when you start to feel if you want to take a run at this thing and make it a career, if you want to call it that. As far as the AA versus AAA thing, I think that you have to go. People live in certain areas that they have no other choice but to play AA or AAA, whatever it is. I think ultimately, if you're in the younger ages, like in middle school, doesn't matter if where you play. I think you just have to play and enjoy it so that you grow the love of the game, and that's ultimately, as that's what's going to carry you on, throughout your career, if you're lucky enough to call it a career.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like what I tell people is it's not necessarily the where, it's the who.
Yeah.
And you play for a coach that can provide an environment where, like you said, like that can help you develop a passion for the game and make you a little bit better of a hockey player at the same time. I mean, that's all you can ask for. And there's been a lot of AA coaches that have done a really good job of that. There's been a lot of AAA coaches that have done a really good job of that. I think whenever you can get the best kids together, at a reasonable age, like you're talking about, it doesn't have to be in diapers. It's always good to be able to challenge and be pushed. But it's an interesting concept, isn't it?
It's up to the kid. It's up to the kid too. It's like if are they gonna have fun in a more competitive environment at the AAA level? Are they gonna benefit from that, or do they want to play and kind of just play the game? You know what I mean? So it's definitely it's up to the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's individual and the family, and there's so many. Everybody always wants like the one answer. Like there's one blanket answer for that everybody should follow, but there just isn't, is there?
Yep. No.
That'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It definitely would. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, you obviously developed into a really good hockey player. And for my question too, I got the chance to play at RPI, play for Seth Appert, who is the coach of the National Team Development Program now, which is the league that you are basically, I wouldn't say in charge of, but you're pretty close to the top there. Yeah. So what was that like? What was that experience like playing at Rippy?
Yeah, well, RPI is still one of my favorite places to to return to, even though I'm, just 5 years out from graduation. The school allowed me to achieve the first goal in hockey that I set for myself, which was being a Division I student athlete. I still return to campus to go to games. If I'm ever in the area, I'll definitely stop at a place called the Naughty Pine, which was a restaurant that me and my parents would go to after some games to grab a bite to eat. But as you mentioned, Apps he's now a close personal friend of mine. He came to my wedding last year. I still keep in touch with Nolan Graham and Brian Vines, who are assistants, throughout my time. So I have nothing but great memories. I was able to get a really good degree. I was able to play, the sport that I love with some of my now closest friends on the planet for 4 years. So I have nothing but great memories and nothing but great things to say about RPI.
It's funny that you mentioned that about Apps, because we had him on our podcast. Seems like forever ago now. And one of the things that he said that I thought was really cool as a coach is he said, I don't really judge my job based upon wins and losses. I judge how good of a job I did based upon how many of my players invite me to their weddings.
Yeah.
And it's just funny that you mentioned that he went to your wedding, and it's just like, it goes back to relationships. Like, he's a relationship type coach, and I think that's what we all strive to be. And just funny that you said that, because you made him a better coach. He's very,
Well,
he
he was.
coached him well.
I mean, a guy like Seth Appert will, he'll be in your corner no matter what. So I'm lucky to call him a friend now. As many people know, he's got some of the best hair in all of hockey. When I got to RPI, he didn't have really any gray hairs, so I would have to think I contributed to a couple of them. But no, he's one of a kind. We stay in constant contact.
That's awesome. It's always nice when you have those relationships with coaches where you can keep in touch after all those years, and it's a special relationship. But all right, so let's move on. Question 3 here. So you went to RPI, played a year or so of pro hockey, and then you got back into hockey. And I believe one of your first jobs was actually a scout in the USHL. You got the scout for Pat McIsh in Green Bay. What was that experience like, being a USHL scout as one of your first jobs? And what were some of the biggest things that you learned while doing it?
Yeah, well, I mean, even while I was still playing, I knew that whenever the day would come that I wasn't going to be a player anymore, I wanted to stay involved in hockey, more specifically on the on the scouting side of things. I always watched, enjoyed watching and evaluating players who I was playing against and with, for that matter. But when I got done playing, it kind of happened pretty quickly. So I was, I just reached out to a bunch of people to see if they had a need for someone in the Northeast. I knew I was going to move back to Connecticut and, start whatever the next, veteran life was. So, I coached youth hockey a little bit. But I reached out to a bunch of junior teams across North America to see, especially with, I started with the USHL, see if they needed someone in the Northeast to monitor guys, so I could try and get my feet wet and build a resume up a little bit. Being in the Northeast, as with prep school, midget, everything like that.
A lot going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, yeah, to say the least. I just figured someone would have need for a guy like myself who would have to learn the player pool, but understand, the makeup of a player that can, not just, get to the USHL, but be impactful at the USHL level. So, I started out with Green Bay, and then the following year, I started working for in addition to Green Bay, the Jamestown Rebels. Joe Coombs was the head coach there. He coached me in Dubuque. And so I monitored all players from all ranges, and then I started working for international scouting services as well. So I was wearing a lot of different hats for them. I was watching the American Hockey League and in college as well too, in my area. So it was just one of those things that I kind of figured out earlier on that was going to be something that I wanted to do. I didn't know where it would take me. Everyone has high hopes, but at the end of the day, I needed a platform to start on, like you said, and that, Green Bay with Mick and those guys, they gave me a great opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I think the biggest thing too, like I get asked all the time by people, like, how do I get into it? Like, how do I get into the business? I want hockey to be my full-time job position, yada, yada, yada. And I think one thing that you said is just exactly how, like you reached out to everybody.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. This is a relationship business, and the more people that you can know and the more people that can learn to trust you, the better you're going to be able to get jobs and move up the chain in your career. And especially if you had played and you still did that, but there's people who haven't necessarily played college or pro hockey that want to get into it, and it's like, hey, get that email out or get your phone out and try and reach out to as many people as you can, because maybe 1% of the people will get back to you, maybe 5% of the people will get back to you, but then there's one relationship that you're getting.
Yep.
So you have to be your own best advocate if you're trying to get into it, and then once you do get into it, you got to do a really freaking good job too.
Yep.
So I find that really interesting. And how was it too? Like, what did you learn? Because you were wearing a lot of different hats, scouting for so many different teams or services, and watching a lot of different age groups and age levels. So what were some of the biggest things that you learned in your, let's call it trial by fire, getting in
Yeah.
and starting scouting when you were just out of the game?
Well, the year that I started, doing scouting work for Green Bay was 2016-17, and they had me monitoring the 2001 birth year in the Northeast. And as we know, the ones were
Pretty good.
they were okay, yeah. So in addition to coaching youth hockey, I mean, I was watching Spencer Knight, Trevor Zegras, Johnny Beecher, Pat Moynihan, like all those guys that went on, to the NTDP, to the USHL, wherever they went. Like that birth year was lights out, and I got to watch those kids on a real regular basis. So I quickly, and like I said, I would always kind of revert back to what I had seen at the college level, at junior, whatever it was, to try and make player comparisons. I think the most important thing that I learned was what not just what a potential USHL player looks like, but a player that's going to make an impact at the USHL level and beyond, for that matter. Anyone could play at any level. I mean, like obviously, you have to be really good, but there's a big difference between identifying a player that could play at a level and then identifying a player who could make an impact at that level. And
So what's the
obviously,
difference between the two, in your opinion?
well, let's say, a lot of people come up to me and say, well, he could play in the USHL next year. Or yeah, of course he could make a team. That's right. But teams don't want guys that can just make the roster. They want guys who can make an impact. Obviously, certain players can do that in different ways. But again, I go back to that first year and all the young kids that I saw that are still, Jack Hughes is in the NHL right now, and he's just the first one of many from that, that really good birth year. And that summer, I had actually been up in Buffalo for the Select 15 camp, so I had seen all those kids, in July, and then monitored the ones that were in my area for the entire year. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, a lot of kids can make teams, but you have to really kind of dial in on what makes a player, what's going to make a player be able to contribute, and whether it's on the scoreboard, whatever it is, at the next level, and have a meaningful impact for their team.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you look for that impact like in the game that they're in? So, there could be like, it's one of the things that I learned is like the eye test. Like there could be kids that can skate and that can handle a puck and yada yada, but they don't really have an impact on the
Yeah.
game. And then
Well,
there's other kids that don't necessarily look as pretty. They might not skate as fast. But they have an impact in one way or another. And I think that means a lot.
yeah, like one of the things that I had to work on myself was I was never going to judge someone too poorly if the first time I saw them they played a bad game or whatever. Like obviously, like you said, the eye test, you could tell the kid who's got it, maybe he's just not playing that well. One of the things I had to rein myself in on was watching a kid for the first time who looked really good, and being like, wow, this kid's going to be pretty good. I had to continue to do my due diligence and monitor that type of player, just so that it wasn't like, oh, you watched him one, he's gonna be in the USHL in a year, no problem. it takes a lot of work, obviously to have books on these guys, but it's a labor of love for me. So, there's plenty of things that I'll need to learn, but being open to it, being open to like guys like yourself, like that's the most important thing, and that's gonna be an attribute that'll take anyone far in whatever profession they're in.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time to be good at scouting. I think.
Yeah.
I think, because I think one of the biggest things is just evaluating yourself as a scout and, looking back at your notes and seeing which players that you liked and why you liked them ended up going on to be good players versus, maybe some of the players that you liked that didn't go on to be players and why. Like, why was it? What did you see? What was it about what people said about them? Like, you take the whole package together and then you really self-evaluate. Like, I think the best scouts are always self-evaluating and they're always figuring out how to be better, just like anything, coaching, playing, all that kind of stuff. I think scouting, I mean, that's just even more important.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so important. The more that I've grown up as an adult, to have that growth mentality that that you talk about all the time. It's not easy to have those things that you're like, wow, this is something that I got to do better. This is something I could do better. But like you said, self-evaluation is one of the most important, to anyone.
Yeah, yeah. You talk to NHL people and college people, like that is the one thing that always gets brought up when they say like, what do kids today need to be better at? I feel
Yeah.
like they always say they don't know how to evaluate themselves. And I think that's something that's so important for any kid that's coming up, being able to understand who you are as a player, where you need to go, what you need to do, and how you need to do it. And you don't get that unless you take some time out of your day and really think about and reflect on those kinds of things. And I think that kind of gets lost nowadays a little bit, and it's almost like a lost art, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, I've had so many conversations with people that work in player development in the NHL, and they're like, "That's everything."
When I played in Dubuque, I was really fortunate to have to be on a great team. But our coaches with Jim Montgomery, Bob Kinsella, and Joe Coombs, one of the things that they talked to us about all the time was just trying to keep as level headed as possible, and thinking about thinking about what's going on around you, thinking about what you're doing. They tell us all the time, you're never as good as you think you are when you win, and you're never as bad as you think you are when you lose. And that's definitely something. If you have a little bit of success, you don't want it to go to your head. If things aren't going your way, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that doesn't mean that you're a bum. It just means that you got to now learn, okay, what I've been doing is has or hasn't been working. I got to change it this way.
Yeah. What made Monty such a good coach? I mean, he's obviously had a bit of a tough year this year, but he's won everywhere he's been and developed players when he was coaching, like you said, in the USHL, and then when he was at Denver. What made him such a special coach to play for?
Yeah, he was so process oriented, and all coaches have their moments where on the bench they might get a little bit rowdy, but one of the things that he was really good at was having us be able to stay in the now with long-term goals in mind. When we were fortunate enough to win, I mean, our 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 motto was, it's about the process, not the result. And so he stuck to that. He was consistent. I think that was one of the most important things. And we had some older guys on the team, we had some really younger guys on the team, but the consistency, being fair but firm, and obviously, I mean, man, he knows so much about hockey, so much. He'd been around so many different people as a player, as a coach. He just knew how each kid on the team was going to react. He knew what made them tick. He never had to get in anyone's grill. Never, never berated anyone. You needed a kick in the tail, you got one, but if you needed a pat on the back, you got one. You know what I mean? So it was just all about, he did right by all of his players, and I think that's something that's what's made him successful.
Yeah, yeah, cool. All right, let's move on. It's cool to be able to talk about the USHL days. I remember sitting in
Yeah.
Monty's office talking players and stuff and character too. But so you were in Green Bay. How did your time in Green Bay lead you to where you are today as the director of player personnel in the USHL? Was it more of a relationship type thing? Like, how did you end up getting this job?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I had started to, again, like you mentioned, build my net of contacts over a couple of years. Um, I think, the one thing that is important in building your network, it's not just showing up and shaking hands. It's being consistent. People have to get sick of seeing you almost. And that's what I try to do. So I try to be at the rink all the time. Anytime that I was asked for feedback or anything like that, I gave honest opinions. And so as time went on, I got wind of the opportunity, through Bobby Kinsella, who was as our assistant coach. He now works for the Montreal Canadiens. He had heard
Good man,
about it.
Bobby. Yep.
Yeah, Bob Katz, man. Yeah, I talk to him all the time. He's you look at a guy like him. He was in the league back in the early 2000s with Sioux City. He built a team that made it to the Clark Cup Finals. He came back out east, coached midget for a couple of years. He was working for the New York Islanders, and then he went out and he made it look easy. But it's a guy like him. He was everywhere. I remember there was a lot of times where he was gone, for games of ours when we were in the USHL. He was just really good at his job, and a guy like Monty trusted him to put together teams that ultimately won the Clark Cup twice in 3 years, which I can't
Pretty tough to
imagine.
do.
Yeah, I can't imagine how tough that is. We saw a couple years before that, Green Bay kind of did the same thing. There's a lot of operators, in the USHL that have done such a great job. But to get back to the point, Bobby had him and I had talked more and more as time went on. After I got done playing, and he connected me with the guys in the league, and over time I had a couple good talks with the league office, and they decided to bring me on board.
That's cool. That's cool. And so question 5 I have with that is, so what are your roles and responsibilities as the director of player personnel? I know you're on the road quite a bit, but what are some of the things that you do for the USHL?
Sure. So, I oversee the USHL central scouting staff. We've got some guys around the country who will identify players, obtain contact information, and then report back to me with that. From there, one of my biggest role is to manage all the league sponsored events. So we've got the combines that generally take place in the spring and summertime. We've got the Fall Classic youth tournament, which every year is the Fall Classic, one of the biggest events in North America and the world, really, for its type. Every USHL team comes in this year, or the past couple of years it's been Pittsburgh. It's going to be in Pittsburgh again. Come into Pittsburgh, each USHL team plays 2 regular season games, and then we've got the youth tournament and the 14U, 15U, 16U, and 18U levels. So my goal is to always bring in the best teams to put them in front of our teams. So, it's kind of like a beginning of the year type thing. And then, a lot of it is talking to players and families about, the benefits of playing in the USHL. I want to inform people as much as possible about the league. Just like you, I hear you talking about it. You love the USHL. The guys who have played in the USHL, who are, worked in the USHL, everyone loves this. Everyone who's been a part of this league continues to love this league. So, my goal is, if I'm talking to a player or their family, I want if if they're presented the opportunity to play in the USHL, that it's their first choice. The league has done wonders for me as a person, as a player, everything like that. I'm in the back of a very long line of people ahead of me who had the same experience. So I just want to make sure that, the kids who are deserving of playing in the league, if they're offered a chance to be on a USHL roster, that's where they want to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, like, what are some of the benefits of playing in the USHL if you're talking to a kid that might, be choosing between playing in the USHL or Major Junior Western League or the OHL or Q or something like that? What are some of the biggest selling points of playing in the league?
Sure. So one of the great parts about our league is that it's completely free to the player and the family. There's no cost incurred. You know, you come to the team, you get head to toe equipment, housing's taken care of, all travel to games, from games. There's no league fees, there's no team fees. You literally just have to show up and then perform.
That's nice.
Yeah. All the while, you're able to maintain your NCAA eligibility. 95% of USHL players will matriculate to the NCAA Division I level. That's a stat that we're very proud of, and we hope it continues to grow. And while all this is going on, every night in the USHL, there's NHL teams monitoring your progress. So you do truly get the best of both worlds. You get to play high quality competition. You get to maintain your NCAA eligibility, and then when time comes, having the USHL on your resume as a player, that means a lot to the professional levels.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about back when I played in the USHL, it was like 2000, like early 2000s, like 2003, 4, I think was my last year. And you look to even where it is right now. I mean, the amount of players that are coming out of the league that are playing pro hockey and getting drafted into pro hockey. I mean, it continues to get better and better. It seems like every year. What do you think you attribute that to? Like, why do you think the USHL, is it because more better players are coming to play in the league now because it's a little bit more marketable, like you were saying? Or is there something else that you think that they're doing a really good job of, or that you're doing a really good job of, that's allowing players to get to that next level?
Well, I think it's definitely the individual teams, especially starting with the owners. The owners are a huge reason why the USHL has grown leaps and bounds ever since it became got its tier 1 status in the early 2000s. Owning and operating a USHL club from top to bottom takes a lot of work. Our league is fan driven, so we rely on loyal and dedicated fan bases around the Midwest. The reason why we have that loyal fan base is because we've been able to attract a lot of players who have moved on and had success at the higher levels, at college, at the professional levels. But then when you really start to look at that even further, the reason why the players come is because of the hockey operations staff each team has. Our guys work really hard. Everywhere I go, I see USHL jackets all over the place, which is great to see. Watching games, talking to players, these guys put in hours and hours of work a day. I don't even know if you could quantify it throughout a season. But for me, when I see that and knowing all of this, it makes me want to work harder for the league. I want to work for these guys. If a conversation that I have with a player makes them think about coming to our league, then, and if that makes their lives easier, then that's what I want to do. The last thing I want to do is to undo someone's shoes when they've worked so hard to tie them. So I think it's just top to bottom. We've got the great owners who have put in so many resources, so much money into, whether it's the individual arena, whether it's the locker rooms, whether it's just making sure that there's really good coaches and staffs in place to guide these kids throughout the season.
Yeah, for sure. They work hard. That's for sure. There's very, very talented, qualified coaches working in the league. I mean, you're talking about former pro coaches. You're talking about NCAA Division I coaches, guys like PK O'Hanley and Mark Carlson who've been there for forever since I was playing in the league in 2003. So it's yeah, it's pretty cool to see where the league has gone. I always had a blast, like, going back and scouting as a college scout, going back to some of those barns in Lincoln and Waterloo and Dubuque and all that kind of stuff. Some of the teams have had major upgrades in their facilities since I was in the league. And I think that's something that's really probably attractive for the league too. I mean, you look at some of these facilities that these teams are playing out of and some of the fans, I mean, what people fail to talk about a lot is just the experience that the kids get by playing in that league. I mean, where else you could play in major junior, obviously, for some pretty good crowds and stuff. So, but being able to play in front of those fans, and like I remember Lincoln when the Star comes down.
Yep. And they're playing Thunderstruck and on a Saturday night, you're in for one, but your adrenaline's pumping. Absolutely. I mean, I remember skating around in Waterloo for warm-ups, and they're blaring that horn so loud you can't even you feel like you're floating on the ice because you can't hear your skates cutting into the ice.
Yeah I remember once, because they have the horn right up like above the goalie, right? So I remember once I was walking behind in that concourse and I had a hot chocolate, and it was right before the game, before warm-ups were going out, and then the team skates out onto the ice and the horn goes and hot chocolate just everywhere, just scared the daylights out of me. But I mean, you think about even too, like, there's so many like traditions in some of those places, like Omaha. Whenever you get scored on, they play that "Heat Is On" song. It just makes you want to punch yourself in the face, because usually when you were playing Omaha, at least when I was playing, they were scoring a lot of goals on you. But yeah, it's a fantastic league. It's a fantastic experience, and you get to still get your college eligibility and play college after that. So how much do you guys talk about when you talk about the USHL to kids that are deciding whether or not they want to come the college route as well, in terms of being able to develop, having the 4 years if you want to play the 4 years? Like, is that a big part of your guys' sales pitch as well?
Well, it just is naturally. Like I said, vast majority of our kids are going to go play Division I. So that's just our bread and butter, basically. Ultimately, it's up to the individual college. You've been on that side of it where you have to do your work to try and get that kid to come on campus. But at the end of the day, if you come to USHL, like I remember when I was in high school, I used to work at Rand Pecknold's summer camps, and he'd let me skate at night with the guys. And I remember talking to him one day, and I told him, it's like, I'd like to play Division I hockey someday. And he said, you have to play at least a year or two of junior hockey. If you can play in the USHL for 1 year, it means that you're ready for college for 4 years, because it's not just the hockey component. That's obviously a huge part of it, but it's the maturity. You're looking after yourself now. Your billets will, they'll feed you. They'll give you room and board. Some will even do your laundry for you, but it's still up to you to make sure that you're getting to the rink on time. There's a lot of accountability, and if you can make it through, all things being considered, if you can make it through a year in our league, you've done a lot for yourself. And I just think that because all of our kids will end up, for the most part, going to college hockey, we're big proponents of it. And it's not just college hockey, but it's the entire route of playing a year or two in the USHL and then going to college and having that time to develop into your 20s as a hockey player, as a human. Those are just there's so much value in that, and just taking as much time as you need to grow up, basically.
Yeah And I always kind of said, like, I'm a big believer that you should play 2 years in the USHL. Like, if you're going to go, you should, unless you're getting out like at 20 or 19 and ready to go. I think a vast majority of kids would do better by playing 2 years, because I think there's a lot. The first year for most kids is tough. It's a very tough year. And I think they don't understand that going in
Yeah.
until maybe game 20 or 30. And they're like, oh, this is a
Getting
grind,
harder.
you know? And I think there's so much value too, to like learning how to be a follower first,
Yeah.
and then being the person who has to lead after that. Like just from a maturity standpoint, like we were talking about, I think having 2 years, I played 4 years, so that's a lot of years,
Let the kids
but
play.
yeah. Um, but like just having the experience to play 2 years in that league and in those different types of roles. And a lot of times too, like, I don't know how many rookies come into the league in our top two line. I mean, there's some, maybe one or
Yeah.
two per team.
Yeah.
But you got to learn how to play a different role. You got to learn how to struggle, have adversity, get coached a little bit harder, go on the bus, play 60 games, have beer spilled on you in Dubuque, all that kind of stuff. Like it's such a good experience, I think, to play 2 years in that league for your development as a player and as like a leader, human being too. What would you say to that?
I agree. I think I'll even take it a step further. I mean, one of the things that I think is not just important, to have the USHL. It's important to go to the USHL and then obviously to go to college. But just the route of junior hockey is, I think it's so important for kids because let's look at it this way. A lot of parents will come to me and say, oh, the junior hockey, that's just them wasting their time, or and not at the USHL level, but at other levels. And my response is, well, let's look at it this way. If a kid's going to go to college at 17 or 18 years old, let's compare that to a kid who has played 2 or 3 years of junior hockey out of high school. They've lived away from home. They've had to take care of themselves. They've got the time management skills down. They've had team experiences, which is extremely important, in life, wherever you end up in life. Having the proficiency and being a part of a team is crucial. So who's going to be better suited for that first time in college experience? Is it going to be the kid who's just left the nest for the first time, who has never had to get themselves up in the morning, or is it going to be a kid who's been through, like you said, the struggles of losing a game and then having to sit on a bus for 4.5 hours in quiet because you can't watch a movie after you
Oh,
lose?
the worst.
But to your point, yeah, 100%. Like you see so many kids that come in who are, they're going to be 2-year USHL players. They'll have their first year where they're not playing the same amount of minutes as they were playing midget. And a lot of times those kids come back and they tear it up the next year. I've seen so many kids come through who have had just, their a regular rookie year, and then they end up becoming NHL draft picks because, that's, like you said, that's just the mentality of going through the grind. Year two, yeah, you know what? I know what to expect, and I'm just going to attack it, and good things happen.
Yeah, for sure. I always said when people ask me about my experience playing in the league, and maybe you can sympathize with this, having played there, like I thought the USHL made a man out of me.
Yeah.
Like if of any other league that I played in or at any other time in my hockey career, I learned the most about myself and grew up. And maybe it's the time that you're 17, 18 years old, so I'm sure there's something to do with that. But like I really thought, like from a maturity standpoint and like becoming a man, a mature individual, the USHL was an incredible league for that, because like you go through so many ups and downs, you meet so many people, you learn so much about yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I really think it made a man out of me.
Well, you're given so much. The teams take such good care of the players, and with that, with great power comes great responsibility. You're expected
Sure.
to. It's performance now. For a lot of kids, this is the first time where they might get healthy scratched, which isn't the worst thing on the planet. It's a learning experience. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you kind of develop that consistent competitiveness in a league like USHL, where you have to bring it every single night. The teams don't get worse throughout the year. They're only getting better because the best players in the United States are all coming together and they're competing with each other every day in practice and then every weekend during the games. So, that's a big growing up moment. Absolutely.
It sure is. We talk about that on the podcast all the time. Like, Jeff played in USHL too. He played 3 years, and it's just like, it's every year you learn something different. Every
Yep.
year, you know a little bit more, and you have a little bit more experience. And having played so many damn years in that league, like I will say to my grave, like, I needed all four of them.
Yeah.
And it was a good experience. But moving on, so it's been awesome to talk about the league. But you're a big part of your responsibility, like we've talked about earlier, is scouting and getting people to the league. And I always get asked this question as a former scout, as a college recruiter. But when you're sitting down and you're watching a game, what are you looking for? Like, what are the things that impresses you, and what are the things that really kind of get you excited about a kid when you're watching them?
Yeah. Great question. Watching a lot of bantam, midget, high school, prep school, you have to take a lot of things into account. Obviously, teenagers are going to mature differently, especially physically. They're on a different timetable. Obviously, character traits are crucial. I think one of the best character traits that you can be labeled as is being a good teammate. That's the most important thing on the planet when it comes to your character. Being a good teammate doesn't always mean that you're all rah rah on the bench while you're waiting for your next shift. Being a good teammate can mean challenging your teammates to get better while you're holding yourself to a really high standard. It's about making sure that your teammates know that you're here to get better, you're here to make them better, and ultimately, when everyone's getting better, the team's getting better. Now, obviously, with all the different shapes and sizes, and come different skill sets. You have to be able to skate. You have to be able to handle the puck. But all things being equal, in my mind, the very best players, the players who will be impactful at the USHL level and beyond, they're the ones with unquestioned high level compete and high level hockey sense. Compete doesn't mean you're crashing and banging every shift, putting people through the wall. Maybe you're going into a puck battle to just win a puck battle and you have a really good stick. Hockey sense, being in the right position at all time, understanding how the system is going to work into a game. Those two things, in my mind, you can always work on skating, you can work on stick handling, you can work on your physical strength. It's hard to
You can go through puberty.
Yeah, you can grow up, and maybe start shaving at some point. But you can't phony out when it comes to compete level and how you think the game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that. Like, my three things, if I were to ever get back into it, these would be the only three things that I would look at, and that's hockey sense, competitiveness, and coachability.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you look at like those three things kind of encompass everything as it is. Like if you're a really good teammate, that's obviously like we've mentioned important. If you're a competitive person, you're going to want to get better at whatever it is you need to get better at. You're not just going to you're not just going to toy around with the things that that are your strengths. You're going to want to play to your strengths and continue to work on your weaknesses. That's a competitor. That's someone who wants to get better all the time. And then obviously, no one's ever going to play. There are no dummies in the NHL. Like that level it's so cutthroat. It's so like hard to play in. That's why so few guys get there. But those guys are so smart with everything that they do, not just on the ice, but with what's going to make them better all around. So those three things, like you can put a lot under those umbrellas with different things, like I said.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to ask you about one of them, and that's being a good teammate, because I just took over as a youth hockey director a couple months ago, and so I'm learning a lot as I go. And a lot has changed even since I was coaching at Cornell and in the rinks and watching a lot of youth games and stuff. And one of the things that for me, I feel like is kind of sad, because I think that being a good teammate, not only will that help you to further your hockey career, But once hockey is over, you're going to have to be a good teammate in your family. You're going to have to be a good teammate at your job, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like a lot of youth hockey right now is so centered around the individual and player advancement that we're really losing the essence of what youth sports really should be about. And that's learning how to be a good teammate is at the top for me of that list. So, you know, we'll have kids watching this, we'll have coaches, parents watching this. Maybe what is some advice that you have for some of these people, and how important, like you just talked about, that's one of the most important things that you think a kid can learn and to get for that player advancement. What's some advice that you might have for them?
Well, it's understanding that there's something that's bigger than yourself, that there's a group of people coming together to achieve something. That's pretty much the definition of a team. In order for you to be a really, really good teammate, it's putting yourself out there to do something that maybe you're not, used to doing. At one level, you might be a power play guy. The next level, you might not be good enough to be a power play guy. You might have to be a penalty kill guy. So it's not having reservations about, what your wants are or what you think your needs are. It's just finding something that you're being asked to do or told to do, whatever it is. And then you want to go out and do it as best as possible, because otherwise you don't want to let your friends down. You don't want to let your boys down in any situation. So like you said, like if you can get a group of kids that are going to be really good to each other, and again, it doesn't just mean everyone's happy and jolly all the time. It's, there's going to be tough times. There's going to be times in practice where guys are competing and, emotions might get high. But at the end of the day, as a coach, I think it's also important to have that direction in mind for everyone, so that everyone knows what the purpose is of what they're being asked to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense too. Coaching the individual is certainly very important, but within a team concept, and you've won championships and you've played for some really good teams at the end of the day. And, a lot of times players who play for those teams, because of the culture that they were in, they end up bringing some of whatever that culture was to wherever they go, and then contribute to that culture and add value. And that's what coaches love. They love winners, and they love people like you're talking about that are willing to sacrifice a little bit of the I for the we. And it really bothers me sometimes in some of the conversations that I have with people and the way that some things are going, where I just hope that doesn't get lost.
Yeah, one of the things that, it was always going to be a really good sign of a good teammate. Let's just take this, for example, kid going to block a shot. What does that look like? Are they going to try and flamingo out of it, and then something happens, and then, you feel really bad? I think that sometimes it's important to understand that you sacrificing, whatever it is for yourself, for the greater good, you feel a heck of a lot better. You don't feel any, when you're putting yourself on the line for your friends, like I said, you don't feel any pain at that point, because, as long as you're understanding what the bigger goal is, you could play through anything else. You could play through taking a slap shot off the foot. And a lot of the times too, your teammates will see that. They'll see that you're committed to the cause, he's committed to the cause, she's committed to the cause, and we got to follow suit. So, sometimes doing the little things can lead others and have others want to do the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. I remember one of our first podcasts that we did was with George Gozdecki. So if you know Apps, then I'm sure you knew George. So for people that are watching, so George was the head coach at the University of Denver forever, won national championships. And before he got to Denver, he was an assistant coach at Michigan State. And one of the stories that he told us on the podcast was about Rod Brindamore. And so he recruited Rod Brindamore to Michigan State. And he said he remembers watching him play in Saskatchewan at the time. And part of the reason why he loved him so much is because this is just incredible. Like, he celebrated for his teammates' goals way more than he celebrated his own.
Yeah.
He remembers that from the 1970s, like just and something. And so he saw that in Rod Brindamore. And then you look at his career and you look what he's doing now and how well he's done captaining a Stanley Cup winning team. Now he's a head coach in the NHL. And you just look back, like the thing that impressed Coach Guaz the most about him, and he's obviously an incredible player, with what he's done with his hockey career, is like the fact that he celebrated his teammates' goals a lot more than he celebrated his own. And I just think that's really cool and has a lot to do with what we're talking about too.
Yeah, 100%.
So, all right, well, let's move on here. It kind of goes a little bit along of what we were talking about. We got question 8 here. So we talked about what you're looking for at the rink and what you're looking for with players. But how much of your job in terms of your scouting and player recognition is done actually away from the rink and doesn't have anything to do with what you see in between the boards?
I mean, a lot of it, again, I'm talking with families all the time from all over the place. And, you can pick up pretty quickly on the ones who are kind of give the canned responses of, every kid says that they're, working out for 4 hours a day or whatever it is. But, at the end of the day, like you can see with the type of personality that in, the high level hockey players that you've been around at all the different levels. I think it's important just to be able to talk to someone. I remember what it was like talking to someone who was in a position of authority. You want to just be a human, have a conversation kind of like what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Those are the type of kids, and it leads to the long run type of thing. Like if we're, if I feel comfortable around you and you feel comfortable around me, then, we'll be able to trust each other and, good things will happen. So I think it's important, for, one of the things that my parents did was whenever I was supposed to talk to someone about anything, about hockey, about school or whatever, they were never with me. They made me do it all by myself. I had to talk to all my teachers by myself. I had to talk to all my coaches by myself. I had to have that relationship, because with that relationship, you grow the trust that way. And with that trust, that the person's got, your best interest in mind. So I think that it's important, to talk to kids on a one-on-one basis, to be able for a kid to have that, and it's not easy. It's sometimes daunting. It can be intimidating at times. I get that. But I think that, when the more I talk to kids who can have a normal conversation with me, no matter how old they are, those are the ones that I'm like, okay, this kid's got, he's got some of the right stuff. Is he a good player? Sure. Can he work on things? Sure. But, at the end of the day, like if you're genuine, and, you're honest, those are two really good qualities to have, in any walk of life.
That's so true. I mean, that genuine word that you said is so important. I mean, like we've talked about in this conversation, I mean, this is a relationship business. And the more you can be genuine and honest with people, the more relationships you're going to be able to build. And I always knew, so as a college coach out there on the recruiting trail, whether you're talking to coaches, whether you're talking to families, maybe even advisors, agents, whatever, you always knew when somebody had an angle, right? When you're talking to them. And then I'm sure you've seen it plenty. Like there's people who talk to you and are genuine, and then there's people who are talk to you because they're trying to get something from you, or they're trying to persuade you, and it's just like, I have a million of these conversations every day. Like I know what you're trying to do right now. And
you could say hi and that's it. And that's good enough. You could just someone and give them a shot in the arm. Hey, that's good enough. You know what I mean? It's just, like you said, that you don't always need to extract information from someone. It's a really, again, for young kids, it's such an important tool to have, to be able to have the self-confidence to speak to an adult or someone else or whatever it is, without having kind of a canned response for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, we talk about that on our podcast all the time. Just what you were talking about earlier, like the fact that your parents are like, no, 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 I'm not going to be in the room when you talk.
Yeah.
Like this is on you, bud.
Yeah.
It is like it's such a good skill to advocate for yourself
Yeah.
and to stick up for yourself. Because a lot of the times you're going into the coach's office, it's not necessarily because you did something well. Usually you're asking why, what is it? What do I need to do? And how can I get more ice time? Yada, yada, yada. And being able to be an advocate for yourself in the right way, being respectful, asking questions, not demanding, not being sour, things like that. It goes a long way for your self-confidence. It goes a long way for just your abilities to have relationships and fight for yourself, fight for something. And I agree with you. I think that's such an awesome skill to have.
Yeah. Like one of the things, one of my coaches a long time ago had talked to me not too long ago about kids always want more playing time. And how do you go about that? Obviously you have to earn it. But it is okay to not go up to a coach and say, hey, I want more playing time. You need to give me more playing time. Another way to look at it is, what do I have to do to help the team more, to be out there more for my team? You know what I mean? Looking at it from that lens goes a heck of a lot further, and you'll get a very honest response instead of, well, I want more playing time. Can I get more playing time? You know what I mean? So, and it's not an angle you're trying to work. It's more just being honest. Like, I got to help the team more. I'm not helping the team enough. What can I do to help the team more? And you'll get an honest answer, having a conversation like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. As a coach, you coached at the youth level a little bit. Like, did you have many of those conversations or no?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to or try to do when I was coaching youth hockey is I tried to roll everyone. I mean, so that way, everyone could see who the guys are that deserve to be out there more towards the end of the game. And if you weren't one of those guys, well, you know what I mean? You got to do something while you're out there. So you want to try and give everyone the equal opportunity, and then, pick your spots accordingly. Of course, there were kids who you could tell their parents were trying to, I guess, flip the script a little bit. But the ones who who were trying to get better, who were struggling in a certain area, those are the ones that you want to work with. And ultimately, those are the kids who you have, again, a good relationship with, to tell them, hey, listen, man, you've been terrible in the D zone. You want more ice time? Try not going -4 every weekend. That certainly helps.
Not good to go -4.
In there, it's not fun.
Yeah, exactly. Involved in there, right? That's funny. Okay, cool. We got a couple more questions for you. This is a little bit relates to the last one we are talking about. Question 9 here. A lot of kids want to play in the USHL, especially a lot of kids in the US. USHL draft is a big thing. They all want to get drafted. And then obviously they want to play in the USHL. You talked about the numbers before. 95% of the players that play in the league end up getting Division I scholarships or playing Division I hockey, I should say. If you had any advice for the kids that really want to play in the league, what would it be?
Yeah, well, that's another great question. I mean, that goes back to what I said about our Dubuque team, and having really good habits all the time, and being very process oriented is crucial. Being a part of youth hockey, you can, when I first started working in youth hockey, always right around November or December, you hear about what's next year, what's happening next year. That starts to right around that. And I had never, before I got into youth hockey, professionally, I had never, that was a foreign concept to me. Any team that I had ever been on, if I had ever heard one of my teammates talk about what's going on next year before the end of the season, let alone in the middle of the season, it wouldn't have been pretty. I would have gotten and most of my really good friends, everyone who I played with would have gotten pretty ticked off at it. So I guess like, and it relates to right now too, the current situation that we're in. You're never going to look forward to the next test that you're going to take in school. Why on earth would you want to look forward to the next season of hockey? This is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to enjoy this every single day. But with that, you're supposed to take every single day seriously. So that's the biggest thing. You can't be looking forward to what's coming next before, you know, before it's there. Uh, any team that I was ever on, and, you know, in junior and college after that, everyone was worried about today. Everyone was worried about the next drill and practice. You know, if you want to look ahead, look forward to the next drill and practice. If you know, if that's how far you want to look ahead, that's fine. So that's the most important. That's a huge thing. I mean, this what we're dealing with right now with the current events in the you know in the world. This is a great lesson for everyone. No one knows when hockey's going to be over. There are plenty of kids, men out there who were guys, girls, whatever, who had played their last competitive game of hockey without even knowing it. It could be taken from you at any point, you know, for any reason. So it's so important to just enjoy what you're doing right now, to take everything what you're doing right now seriously, and just yeah, live in the now. It's so cliche, but it's cliche for a reason.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. Well, question 10 is what is some advice that you would have for parents? I have to imagine that it'd be pretty similar.
It looks pretty similar. I mean, you know, my parents were fantastic with me with growing up. The only time my mom or dad ever got ticked off at me with anything really was if it was effort related. So I learned pretty quickly that effort's pretty important. Whether you perform or not, you know, that's up to you. But if the effort's there and, you know, the intent of doing well all the time is there, that's what you want to look out for. Because, you know what, like, again, everyone ends up in the same place in men's league. So let's not get too carried away with, you know, with what's going on, you know, at 15U or 16U. You want to be able to put your child into an environment where they're comfortable in making mistakes, because that's the only way that you learn. That's, you know, I'm not breaking any news there. So advice to the parents and to the players, of course, yeah, it's going to be similar. Like, you want to live in the now. You want to make sure that as long as the effort and the intent's there for, you know, for your child, that's all you can really ask for. Because if you're getting upset about performance, you know what, I hate to break it to you, but you're just trying to live vicariously through them.
Nah, you've never seen that. I think it's such good advice. I mean, it's really hard to live in the now. I think
Yeah.
it's part of the team building. You know, when I go around and I do my team building, did it with the elite hockey academy where you were at. It's one of the things that I talk a lot about is like it is very easy to dwell on the past.
Mm.
It's very easy to get really worked up and worried about the future, and it's very hard to live in the now. It's just kind of human nature that way. But I think the people that can really do that, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time and effort, and like
Yeah.
focus to focus on the here and now. And I agree with you. Like, even in your job too. I mean, as a scout, it's being present in the rink that you're in and watching intently. And for every walk of life, I just think that's such an important thing to be able to do. But it's tough, especially for kids and parents in youth hockey, because the way the tryout rules are now, I mean, that choosing next year is happening earlier and earlier, and it's a tough pill to navigate, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, you know, you want to be able to have, like you said, the mentality of, you know, we're going through a time that we've never been through before, or a lot of people haven't been through. Most people haven't been through. So it's so easy to, like you said, look in the past. Like it was way easier for me to worry about what I had done than what I was going to do. So making sure that, again, being process and, process oriented and having really good habits, that's, if you, the quicker you learn that and just not worrying about anything else, it's going to serve you well, again, not just in hockey, but in life.
Yeah. Amen. I think that's a good thing to end on right there. Nice little lesson. It's like Mr. Rogers, his show.
Yeah.
You just end on a good note like that. So, well, I appreciate you coming on. You're doing a great job in a great league. My experience in the USHL, as yours, was unreal, and wouldn't trade those for 4 years for anything else. And look forward to continuing to collaborate and keeping in touch and all that kind of stuff. And if there's anything that I can do to help out your guys' cause, obviously let me know.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing, more for the young adults in the game of hockey than you guys can imagine. So credit goes to you guys. You guys work tirelessly to have gotten your Think Tank podcast off the ground. But everything that you guys do is honest, and it's obviously the intent is great. But you guys do such a great job. You're having more of an impact on your listeners, on whoever's listening, than you can imagine.
Thank you. It means a lot, man. I appreciate that. It's why we do it, and we hopefully that's our goal, make as big of an impact as we can and have fun being able to talk to people like you while we do it. So I appreciate those words coming from you, and I'm sure we will see you in a rink at some point very soon.
Can't miss me.
Yeah, you can miss me. I can fly under the radar a little bit. I get called stick boys every once in a while. I get mistaken for players sometimes, but it's all good. So good stuff. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Good luck, Toby.
All right.